week, we'll meet with one community leader, a researcher, an architect, a developer or planner to discuss innovative solutions in order to create healthy, equitable, sustainable, prosperous environment for our children and the next generations. Today, I'm meeting with Davis Harte, a fan of her work and her research. She has a PhD in design for health. She's director of the health program at the BAC. So excited about all this. Please, Davis, let us know more about you.
Thank you so much, Isra, for inviting me to have a conversation with you. This is very exciting, as you say. I am Davis Harte, and as a person with a PhD in, it was actually in health, which I worked with midwives at the University of Technology, Sydney, who were in hospital settings and in home birth settings. They said, where is the design? Is design being thought about at all in these spaces? So my health degree is a design health dissertation. So my work in the birth unit design has been something that connects backwards to my history and also is actively present now in some of the research projects I work on, in addition to being the director and faculty of the Design for Human Health program at the BAC. So, and I'm a mom. You can't tell by looking if somebody's a mother or not. So that keeps me busy. Thanks for having me, Ursula.
That's wonderful. That's an amazing path. That's just mind blowing. How when you mix all these things together, it's awesome. What's the drive behind all this research?
Well, the drive is being lucky. And what is luck besides opportunities presenting themselves and feeling ready to meet them? So as a early childhood educator, which is what I did for my first 10 years out of undergraduate, I worked with very young children in daycare spaces. So within that space, I kept thinking, who designed this space? Did they know children? Have they spent any amount of time with children? I've always thought, how can I better understand how spaces are designed and built for specific populations, like eight 2-year-olds. That's a really unique population. So this was my early design work, was actually being an educator. So it was not until later that I went back to school for a master's and did design for human environments that I studied more in depth what's going on in a preschool setting. And I learned how to do research and what is research? What do we mean when we talk about research? It's not necessarily just looking on Google for the latest pizza place. That's, I'm going to research where to get dinner. That's something. Doing academic level research became more and more interesting to me as I saw how it could be connected to policies, or it could be connected to people's lived experiences. So whenever I think of how my own path has unfolded and who I'm a person, what I've experienced in spaces, in myself, then I feel like I can bring that to the work that I'm doing. I love doing my master's project. I wasn't yet a mom. I finished filming preschool children's play behavior while I was 8 months pregnant. So I would film these little 4-year-olds at play in their preschool room. And some days there would be some houseplants next to their Feely table, where they could choose to go to different stations. They would move around the room for 45 minutes and choose where they wanted to be, self-selecting their activities. So I randomized, some days there would be houseplants next to their Feely table, some days there wouldn't be. My question that drove this research was how would plants affect their ability to pay attention and have focus on their play? If they choose to go to a Feely table, would not everybody agree they should attend to their play and pay attention to it and be engaged in that? But what drove that question to begin with was, wow, this statistic I keep hearing over and over, that we spend 90% of our time indoors. It's 89 point something percent. I can't remember the actual up to date. But the truth is we are nature. We need nature, but we also do need safe places to inhabit, to protect us from the weather and protect us. So how could my question leading into that master's work was, how could we replicate nature? It's to some degree. Is there a replication? Is a group of houseplants going to help children's attention and their restoration? So there's a lot more theory that goes into this than is maybe evident at first glance. So I base a lot of this work on the work of Kaplan and Kaplan in Michigan, who developed a theory called the attention restoration theory. We're all familiar with attending and working and focusing so diligently, and then just something is just in us becomes irritable and snaps, and we don't feel good about continuing. We get cranky, we make mistakes. This is attention restoration fatigue, attentional fatigue rather. So there are ways to moderate that and to help people learn how to tap into their own brains and their own nervous systems to help refresh them and allow them to. This is why we encourage people to have windows with a view. For instance, it's my belief and my hypothesis that, I don't know it's been tested or not, but having a window view will allow somebody to shift their eye gaze in a way that will calm their amygdala and calm them and help them pay attention again to what they're working on. So that's a long answer to your question, but it's just, as you said, it's exciting to have the opportunity to discuss some of these thoughts about my work and where it's leading.
Yeah, it sounds pretty simple, but it's great. I remember my daughter is 8 and she's going back to Montessori school, and I remember when she was 2. She was also in a Montessori school, and the teachers complained that she's overactive. She's running around. She called her the runner, and I gifted the teacher to the class. I don't know, about 12 house plants. And I was like, I think that would be helpful to the children. She said, I don't think so. I can't water them every day. But I think it did help. It did work. I think they saw some improvement. I had to.
Well, interesting. Yeah, I wasn't able to do too much of a study with a master's project, but early signs pointed to, when the plants were there, the children did have an increase in their attention. The level of sustained attention, the time that they spent there was longer when the plants were there than they weren't. So it's a pilot study. It's on my list of studies to revisit and to publish, because it's good information to have, and it's an easy, simple solution that has to do with design.
That's wonderful. So, Davis, if you were to pick the three major environmental, when I say environmental, I mean health and everything that you feel that should be changed immediately in our cities, in our larger environments outside the school, that's causing stress. We know that it's not a secret that we live in a time where people are stressed and there are high rates of suicide and things like that. If we need to pick 3 things that we need to work on, what would they be?
So for reimagining cities, on the city scale, are you thinking, or any scale?
Yeah, like a neighborhood, city. It could be like the smaller scale or the city scale. But yeah, we can start from the neighborhood.
Sure. The 3 main tenets of the Design for Human Health program have to do with our biology and our physical environment. So that's one sphere. And then an overlapping sphere would be the sociological level. And then the third, if we picture the Venn diagram with 3 bubbles, the third is the and emotional. Our inner soft states, these inner emotional worlds, the mental states, the psychological. So for those 3, to get more specific of how they are pertinent, is that when we think of a person's movement, when we're moving around more, we're feeling less anxious. So having the need and the ability and the safety to, when you first wake up, to be able to go out and have fresh air and have sunshine on your eyes, which research is clear, having your eyes exposed to sunlight in the morning will help your circadian rhythm get into the right rhythm. Not looking at it through a window, not looking at it through artificial lighting, actual sunlight. So is there a way to design neighborhoods and houses so that people feel encouraged and not just, oh, here's another chore I have to do, I have to go outside. No, this is something if we design it in such a way that it is appealing and it's pulling and inviting a person, oh, this is wonderful, I can easily go outside and get my 10 minutes or 2 minutes of sunlight on my eyes. They're going to feel better and they're going to sleep better later in the day. So once a person's biology and a person knows themselves what routines are working for them and they're feeling empowered to carve out patterns in their day in such a way that then they're able to be more productive. They will work perhaps not more hours. That is not the goal for any of us, to work more and more hours. We want to have more effective work while we're working. So I can imagine reimagining innovative cities as being a place that people know that there are options for them. There's not a designated, you must behave in this way to be healthy. This is not a healthy way to be. We're talking about a way that encourages freedom and the feeling of, oh, I could do this or I could do that, or oh, there's this third or fourth choice. What am I inspired to do today? Oh, now I have this lovely workspace or my lovely play space if I'm a child. Things that will allow us to keep generating patterns throughout our day, I think is one of the key components to a healthy, sustainable, just type of a society.
So we need more sunlight, we need freedom, and we need to move. I think that's how I understand it. Because freedom is not like, here's a gym, just go to the gym. Or here are 2 gyms.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and the freedom could be, to put it into a little bit more of a design dialogue, we would want to encourage curiosity, encourage learning, because if people are curious and learning, then they're going to feel enthusiastic. They won't feel as self-conscious. They won't feel, oh, I'm an anxious person, I can't do that. They'll think, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder what's going on over there. Let me go and let's just go check out this. Perhaps there's a local area in a neighborhood that has an informational board, local posts are put up, other neighbors also circulate there, and there's a garden right next to it with benches and a little bit of play equipment. So it has an intergenerational appeal. It would pull in neighbors who want to see each other, who are at all different phases of their lives. And this curiosity and pull, invitation towards something could increase the social connections that we know also from research is essential to help us feel a part of something. And we can create meaning in our own lives through having conversations with people and learning that this is different from what I'm used to, and I want to learn more, and I'm curious about this, and I'm open and willing to be uncomfortable while I talk to this neighbor from a completely different culture, what have you. This would increase equitability, because people would get, I've seen you here before, I know your face. Oh, I might even say hi, and let's start this slow working at the speed of trust. So there's the amount of time and the safety so that neighbors could come and circulate in a way that's, once they're up and moving, they're feeling a little more empowered. They recognize the patterns in their own day that help them feel better or not as good, move towards the patterns that help them feel better. And there's that freedom of choice about, how are we getting our tasks done? How are we keeping the household together? How are the children being looked after? All of these real life experiences that we need to keep happening in partnership with each other.
That's amazing. So we need curiosity. We need to evoke curiosity. We need people to like being social and meeting other people and being safe in the same time. That's wonderful.
Right. One way that this can happen of a design pattern would be being alone together. So the opportunity to be on the edges in a way that would feel safe if a person does not actually want to interact with anybody yet, but maybe someday they would. Are there alcoves? Are there spaces on the edges that feel protected with some, okay, there's nobody behind me. There's a hedge and there's a little bit of, an edging here so I can look around and see what's happening and be curious and watch others interacting. And then when I feel more confident or I feel more interested, I could move out of that area. So things like alcoves and being alone together spaces can go a long way in public spaces.
Awesome. That makes me think of some of the research I've done in my master's about proximity and privacy, and I was trying to find the line between when do we need proximity and how much is too much proximity, and when do we need privacy, and seeing that seems like students in dorms, when they did not have privacy, they were like just long corridor with shared bathrooms, shared kitchens. They did not like each other. They were aggressive against each other. They did not have friendship after that. But when they were given choices, just like you mentioned, they had some sort of privacy with the design. They had friendships. It's the same college, same courses, but just two different dorms. And they developed friendships. They were very happy. They had better grades. All that because of that simple configuration in the design, which is awesome, amazing. So if we were thinking about this in a city scale, in a neighborhood, let's say neighborhood scale, I know we need, from what you're saying, we need to evoke curiosity. We need to give them some privacy, alcoves, you're saying, and create that proximity, create that place where they can. I'm also thinking, like, you said something about people sharing, like, I don't know, about their house chores, or they're talking about their private life. I was thinking, why do people feel safe to share this information on social media, but not out there with their friends when they're, or with strangers when they meet them in the park? It's pretty interesting. What if we create that level of safety where you can go out and you know that this is a friend and can give me advice, while all the advice is being shared on social media? What does make people feel that safe there and not in a park?
That's a good point. That's so interesting. I wonder if it has something to do with a buffer, some sort of time buffer, because the people on social media might be getting response and feedback, but it's not instantaneous necessarily. It might be within a minute, it might be quickly, whereas standing side by side, there's not that buffer of I'm going to disengage now or I'm going to move closer towards. And if we get more understanding around the psychology of spaces, environmental psychology, we have an either avoiding approach or approaching. So moving through life, if we generalize things just quite broadly, we either are attracted towards or we avoid something. So thinking of spaces in a way that allow people to have it wouldn't be considered socially unacceptable to avoid something or approach something. If they're both permissible and they're both encouraged and supported, then it would be easier to navigate going out into the world and making friends and talking to people. It's just astonishing to me that there are lonely people on this planet. I know there's many, many, many lonely people, but what is our population on this globe? There's people everywhere. You're bound to make a friend. So it has to always come back to the individual. Talking about a neighborhood scale or a city scale, it still is an individual self-awareness, and as they say, to know thine own self be true. It allows for the ability to make those choices from a centered place, I think.
So my other question, Davis, you have worked abroad, and particularly in Sydney. I don't know if you worked in other international experiences. So from that work, what kind of differences do you see between what the research that's being, or implementation of the research in environmental health in abroad and in the US?
Well, my experience working in Sydney was working with midwives who are interested in design. They were not designers. I did not spend much time with. There were a few colleagues who worked on the birth unit design project who were architects and designers. So I can only really talk about it from that particular specialty, that focus. And that is also still how I work globally, is on the Global Birth Environment Design Network team. So I have colleagues in Toronto and in Italy and also in Australia. We're always open to more colleagues in other countries because there clearly is going to be differences, right? There's the cultural and political landscape. There's the sociological landscape that creates different avenues for how one, in this example, how a person would go and have a child, bear a newborn. In the United States, the terminology having a midwife is still considered a bit counterculture. It's still alternative, versus most people will go and see, a medical doctor in a medical setting. So from the beginning of the childbirth process, first getting pregnant, you're visiting medical spaces all of the time, going through the assessment of how things are progressing and going along this orderly path, and things should progress a certain way. And so then during the birth experience, there would also be a similar expectation of, well, this is how it's done. We go to hospital. And as it turns out, we are acknowledging and saying out loud, this is the largest medical undocumented research experiment that's ever happened, is sending well, healthy women to a place that is meant for repair. And it's not going so well. I mean, yes, babies are getting born and they're loved and people love their babies, but there's a roughly 33% cesarean section rate, which it's a major invasive surgery. It's not one that we should be increasing. We should see that number drop, because a woman who has just had major surgery is not well equipped to be attentive and spend time in an attachment phase with their newborn. The mother and infant dyad is one that is at a pivotal moment in their experience together to develop those neurohormonal attachments at the very beginning of life. And my colleagues and I with the Global Birth Environment Design Network argue that there are alternatives, and we need to reimagine birth spaces so that a person can feel medically supported, yet in a place that is safe for them and comfortable for them, with their own ecology around them, the people around them that they love, so that all of their hormonal processes are most attuned to that experience of giving birth, rather than it being into a fight or flight, reactive, scared place. That set of hormones is counter to normal, satisfying birth. So what does all this have to do with the difference between US and Australia? Well, there are always going to be a sociological and political lens in how spaces are designed and how they're go through the process of getting a co-participatory input. Who's helping make these decisions about this new building? Who's part of the development team? Who is being invited to discuss how this new hypothetical place is being designed and built? I can't really compare the two other than from that point of view, I think.
Secretly, I don't know if I should supposed to say this or not, but secretly one of my intentions is to bring legislators' attention to the work that architects do, and that the fights that we're going through and all the research we're doing. And I think that's an excellent point that you're putting. We're
Right. I mean, when we have the evidence that these certain design features will be beneficial, and yet it isn't able to show up in the final designs, it's nobody's fault necessarily, but there is a lot of room for policy change and legislative change to encourage these evidence-based design factors, such as, well, we know from the work of Daz Curran Reed that curvilinear furniture has a more calming yet attentive, people have a more attentive response if they have curvilinear furniture in a space rather than rectilinear furniture. So when we think about, well, what does that mean? Curves help us feel soothed a bit. We could be curious about why that is, and we should study that. But also, well, what does that mean in practice? Are we going to start building only curved spaces? That isn't necessarily the answer, but think of it from a homeowner wanting to make a renovation in their kitchen, say. They could design the appearance of a curve without actually putting in curvilinear furniture. The way they lay their tiles, or the way they have some paint applied to the walls, for instance, could have a calming effect and soothing effect on them. So there's a lot of evidence coming out, and how do we get all this really great academic literature into the hands of designers and architects, and have it be important so that it shows up and is meaningful for people. That's always an area to be improved upon, it from my point of view.
I think I can't remember the exact words, but I think I read in your research about children who were in an abusive environment or something like that. What kind of spaces, and especially for schools, for all children, let's say public schools, what kind of spaces that would promote the psychological and all health for children in schools?
Children have been a top theme of mine for all of my design work. And I was really fortunate to be able to be the lead environmental designer on an abuse intervention center. So that might have been what you're referring to. So I do know quite a bit about what the evidence says and how it can put together packages of interior spaces for kids. But the first point to really drive home is that the children are not unilaterally the same everywhere. There's differences in different populations, in different schools, in different neighborhoods, in different parts of the country with different climates. Knowing who your students will be, or who you're working with, you can't just generalize and say this will work for everybody. So I am very much a fan of getting to know the individuals. And in fact, my town is rebuilding schools right now, and I was lobbying for them to do co-participatory design and have the children help design the spaces with them. They decided to go another route. They were not of the opinion that that would be worth the time and the resources to do. And it makes me very sad, because they have incredibly astute opinions. So asking the children what it is they need. A really great example of a town that is succeeding wildly with this is the Child Friendly Initiative in Boulder, Colorado. My colleague Mara has worked on this quite a bit. I don't have her last name off the top of my head, but if you look at Boulder, Colorado, child-friendly cities, you'll see examples of children designing spaces for themselves with adults who take them seriously and then actually make it happen, and it's incredible. I can't wait to go visit myself someday. So all of those things said, when I think about schools, and it's a driving question, everybody's very eager to know how we can help children be in schools in a healthy way. And I don't have the answers. I know a lot, and I know how to read the research and make suggestions. For me, I put a trauma-informed design lens on everything that I do, because we know a lot about being trauma responsive, meaning we understand what trauma is. We know how to ask people what their adverse childhood experiences were and rate us. We recognize that it's becoming extraordinarily common for people to have multiple ACEs, one or more of these adverse childhood experiences, that creates a trauma level within the person. Not automatically. Some might have ACEs and not feel like they've experienced trauma, whereas others will have had the same number of ACEs and feel much more triggered. And what happens is people become unless they have some help to work through it, and it's very possible to do so, but people become ensconced and sort of stuck in a triggered place, meaning there's a hyper arousal. They're in a place of being hyper vigilant, meaning they're looking for the dangers all of the time. And it's neural hormonal. It's the way their brains are wired because of having experiences that didn't get processed properly. So working with a trauma-informed design approach allows us to understand the principles of being trauma-informed with evidence-based design coming together to create places that have a welcoming entryway. Spaces that don't create anxiety and re-trigger a person. For instance, schools and buildings that are very, very tall or have leaning in, like the angling of a building. If a young child is approaching the front of a school and the building is leaning over them such that there's a sense of looming, then it's not hard to imagine that child's going to feel overwhelmed, intimidated, and respond either by shutting down or by lashing out, because they feel under threat. So whether that's a real threat or not doesn't matter. It's the threat response system that is hypersensitive. So that's just one example of how many details are involved in a place such as a school, with lighting everywhere, with wall color everywhere, with circulation paths that need to be designed, spatial designs. The list goes on and on. So of ways to figure out, okay, this makes sense. So when each decision is being made by the architect and design team, thinking of it with the trauma-informed design lens on will allow the space to move towards whole and healthy and well for not just the children, but we certainly want the teachers to be happy and to feel supported and to have spaces set up for them that support their innovative work and want to be there and to enjoy being there.
So we know now building form can be intimidating. There are certain colors. What kind of colors that make children hyper or calm them down? What do you?
Well, this is, again, it's about who are the actual students that are going to be there. What's the dominant culture and what's the preference? Different cultures view different colors in different ways. For instance, I think I cannot just list off colors that are better than others, but what I can say is that it's very easy to create overstimulating environments. Spaces that should be calm are too crowded with with visual stimulation, lots of posters and just messy clutter everywhere with here's all the examples of the kids' art from the entire year. And there needs to be some level of blank space. So clearly neutrals that are light, looking at the light reflectance values of paint colors is important because we want to make sure that there is the optimal level of light available. And so what colors of the walls are is going to affect it. And it's, we can see the problem of in the 70s maybe, or 60s or 80s, when they said, oh, pink is soothing, use pink, or blue is soothing, use blue. And then everything is just all, that's all you see. And it's like, does this appeal to you? I don't know why people thought it was a great idea, because it's monochromatic in a saturated pastel color. It doesn't feel good, does it? I mean, it's pretty easy to assess your own reaction and say, whoa, that's too much. The colors shows with the process of choosing the colors for the ABC house, the Abuse Intervention Center that I worked on, involved me taking paint samples and getting large sheets of paper and painting double coats of paint on these large sheets of paper so that we could really get a sense of what that color actually was and how it behaved during different times of day, against the east window versus the south window. So we could really see how, I mean, color can behave differently. If you pay attention to even just a blank off-white colored wall at one time of day versus another, you can see that there's a difference. So there needs to be nuance and an established dialogue with the people who are going to inhabit that space to choose colors, I think.
More research and implementing all these ideas would promote social justice. Like, let's say we've created these amazing schools that children had helped designing. Children are happy. Would that help creating social justice? Or if, I don't know if that makes sense, but do you see a pattern that some children might get this opportunity, let's say private schools or schools that are in the suburb or in rich neighborhoods as compared to other places, other cities, and how to make that available for all?
Well, I think the more we just ask this question and talk about it, the more it becomes amplified as an essential question. So not necessarily having easy answers doesn't mean we should shy away from talking about it. I think that's the turning point that we've gone through the last little while. It's certainly very fair question, and well, sure, those with the resources are going to have the knowledge and the time to work on creating a co-participatory design space. But everybody deserves spaces that feel good to be in. There clearly needs to be some mass decision making, some population level prioritize all kids, especially the most vulnerable, those who are under resourced, the ones who are not given, they're underestimated. These are the folks who have as much need for this, good healthy spaces as anybody. There's not anybody, I think, that doesn't deserve to be in healthy, good feeling spaces. But that sounds like pie in the sky, because I know what's going on in old under-resourced buildings. I've worked in them in Boston, and we even just talking about the physical level of the materiality of what's in those buildings. And it's shocking the amount of work that needs to be done to get them even to neutral, even to just create a space where it isn't triggering to arrive at school every day. I mean, the decibel levels of cafeterias, for instance, it is doing a lot of harm to kids. So I wish I had some good answers on how to talk about how to create social justice through design. Um, I feel what I can do in when I attract and invite people to be students in the Design for Human Health program, or I know, people, how can I help them understand how to get a degree? What does that involve? What are all of the steps to even apply? What does it mean to follow through on a degree? And what does that mean when you graduate with a degree? Does it matter if you have a degree or not? How do we work starting a new practice? Um, Design is a superpower. It won't solve every problem, but it can solve a lot of problems. And to have people decide that this is available to me, I want to do it. I want to be a person who can advocate for people with different abilities from other educational places that don't have that same literacy about spatial design or fluency with English, or there's just any number of situations that could be understood just compassionately, right? Empathetic design. Um, I mean, I could be pie in the sky about ideas, and then I can also say, well, more of us that have these conversations, the more that we are creating that change, even if it doesn't feel like it's enough, it's not quick enough, it's not actually my building right now where my kid's going to school. Um, I don't know what to do about that though.
So how does that, if you were to describe, if you have an open budget, if you have all the power, like superpowers to whatever you want to design is gonna be actualized, what does that pie in the sky would look like for women and children? What is that perfect, let's say a city, like a perfect utopian city for women and children? How would it look like?
I think it comes back to those same types of principles that I was talking about earlier about seeking places where you can feel a sense of freedom, which would amount to safety and choice and having some control over what's going on in the environment. But knowing that your basic needs will be met, there's plentiful drinking water, and there's a place that I can go to the bathroom safely. These are, women and children are constantly needing to do biological needs together, whether it's food or keeping their bodies clean and dry.
Breastfeeding.
Yeah, if that was these most fundamental needs being met first, and then you think of the person who is the most challenged by life, going out in life, mentally, physically, um, how is it for them to navigate that space? So if we design the utopian city for the person who, there's differences of needs based on what the differences of abilities are. So even the concept of universal design doesn't help us all the way. Inclusive design would allow multiple options so that the very, very tall person is comfortable drinking water, just as the person who is a small child in a wheelchair could also access the water in the drinking fountain. But let's assume that all of our basic needs are met in a space. Well, then we need meaning and we need richness and excitement and time to explore and to wonder and spend time just seeing new things. And just, I didn't know that bird made that sound. I've heard that sound, and now I've gotten a chance to see this bird and feel connected to our great planet that we're on. It's certainly no small task, but you gave me all full resources, so I can see it now. I can feel how fun it is to be there, because life is supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be able to learn from each other and meet really challenging people, because challenging people in uncomfortable situations help us learn and help us lean in and feel a sense of purpose. Um, so I think having that in our design spaces, I could spend hours going through and talking through all the details of it, but hopefully that gives a good gist of a place for women and children to play and to have lots of caretakers. So I know I can trust my friends when they take my daughter out, and it's something that they're going to have a fun time together with. I can trust my partner to be with be with our daughter as a non-female. So it's the mothers and the children, but it's also this coming together with everybody, so that nobody has to be working so hard. We're all working way too hard. So it's just this lighten the load by connecting with each other more, I think.
Awesome. So I read diversity, again, curiosity, and nature, and all that thing, all the stuff I dream of. I think that can be achievable. Could be achievable.
Mm-hmm.
Designed for.
Well, yeah, we wouldn't get all these ideas if it wasn't achievable, and we're not the only two. A lot of people think this way, so it does mean it's achievable. So we'll just get it done, but it does not have to be perfect.
My side. Thank you, Davis. That was the most wonderful hour I had in months. Thank you so much. I wish I'm a student and taking all your classes. That's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about this. So
Well, thank you. I am. It's mutual excitement. So thank you, Isra.